Welcome back to another episode of the Gifted Performance Podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video and subscribe for future content. For more information about our one-on-one coaching and other training or nutrition options, visit giftedperformance.com. Our newest feature, the Gifted Express, offers premium programming for bodybuilders, powerlifters, Olympic weightlifters, and lifestyle clients for only $30 a month. Enjoy the video. We'll see you on the next one. And as always, stay gifted. Welcome back, guys. Another episode of the GPP, giving you knowledge, a lot of knowledge today, and practical takeaways, some of those as well, to improve your own general physical preparedness. I'm happy to say that I am joined today by a big brain, 200 IQ, in an area that we don't talk about a lot, but cannot continue to go ignored. Dylan, what is your official title? When someone's like, hey, Dylan, we're at a dinner party, and I say, hey, Dylan, what do you do for a living? What do you tell them that you do for a living? What's like the official title?
Yeah, I usually just say I'm a licensed therapist, and they're like, what kind of therapist? And I say I specialize in mental health.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then I'm joined by two other beautiful co-hosts, the men who need no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. Big Paulie Rocket. Paul, how are you today?
Hi, awesome.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Nice. And Jason. Jason
awesome.
Just hopped off a tutoring call. How did the tutoring call go? Are our students embarrassing you and disappointing you with every chance they get?
I don't believe that I'm qualified to help anyone do anything. And the tutoring has this isn't selling it.
We got to edit that out.
It's going wonderfully, Ryan. It's going well. It's going well. I feel like I'm enriching the lives of our students.
Good. And if you're like, what the heck? What's tutoring? I haven't even heard of that. I'm new around here. I haven't heard of the tutoring. Stay tuned. Semester 2 will be ready for you guys mid-June. So go over to the Gifted Performance page, turn on post notifications, and find out what we're teaching in semester 2 and what you can get certified in. That's enough selling stuff. I'm done with it. I'm tired of it. I want to talk more about Dylan, with Dylan, for Dylan, all that good stuff. Dylan, give us an introduction to you as a person. You know, you've introduced what you do for a living. Who is the man with the very hard last name to pronounce that I'm going to try right now? It is Bilyeu.
Perfect. Yeah.
Bilyeu.
I nailed it.
Bilyeu. Yeah. Nailed it. I've heard so many different variations, so I'm glad you got it. That's
What's
great.
the worst one? What's the worst one that you've heard?
Oh, gosh. I heard one the other day, gosh. I've heard Blue, Bilyeu, all these different
I like that.
pronunciations. Yeah,
Bilyeu.
Is it any relation to Tom Bilyeu, I believe is the fellow on YouTube?
Yeah, the Quest Nutrition guy. I wish he was my uncle or something like that, but no, unfortunately no relation.
You should just make him relation. Just say it. No
I
one's
wish you had that Quest
DNA
Nutrition money.
I know, that'd be awesome. But yeah, so my name's Dylan. What got me into the bodybuilding community, I guess, was I was really fat, overweight, bullied as a kid growing up, and played baseball, sports, but I was like that fat kid. I was decent at sports for my weight, but just was just not happy with where I was. I started to play the violin in 4th grade, and I wanted to try football because of my size. My mom's like, no, you'll break your arm, so I didn't. They cut the program in high school, so I'm like, what do I do now? Some dude was like, hey, wrestling team. Sounds good. So I joined the wrestling team junior year of high school, lost about 45 pounds, started to go from just, video game addiction, more or less, just always playing video games, to never playing video games and eating okay. Not, binging, nothing like that, not restricting calories, just, working out finally and doing cardio, and lost that weight. Senior, I joined the National Guard at 17 as well. So that helped me get in shape as well throughout that process. And then senior year rolls around, started practicing. Third match of the season, I ended up breaking my arm, spinal fracture, and now I have a plate and 12 screws. And so that kind of got me on my fitness journey, and I became really passionate about the bodybuilding sport, started to follow all the, the athletes there. CrossFit was a big thing around that time as well. So we did CrossFit for wrestling and the military, things like that. So got my degree in psychology back in, 2014, and then took a few years off working at a treatment facility for kids and really loved it. And I wanted to help families and kids more. And so I'm like, what can I do? So I decided to go to grad school for clinical mental health counseling and got my degree in 2018, became a licensed therapist, worked in a facility with men with sex addiction and other co-occurring disorders. So I saw a lot of different personality disorders, OCD type stuff, eating disorders, things like that, along with the sex addiction piece. And so my passion has always been bodybuilding, competitions. I did jiu-jitsu for quite a while as well. I just love that competition aspect of things. So I've decided I kind of want to combine my passion with just athletes and all those different types of sports with mental health, just to, help athletes, because I know that's a big thing, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, things like that throughout the bodybuilding community and athletes in general. So
I have two things. I'm going to let these guys comment. Number one is that one of these days when I find myself out in we'll call it the acceptable state of Arizona. I'm from Florida, the greatest state in the entire United States. So, everything is below Florida, just goes Florida and then everything else. But when I find myself out in the state of Arizona, I'm going to take you out for a beer because I feel like you probably have some quality stories for some things that you've seen, places that you've been, places that you've worked, all that stuff. I feel like I could really, pick your brain and we could have a good conversation there. Number two is that I want to give you props for playing the violin because to this day, there are two instruments that are super impressive to me. If you can rip on the piano or on the violin, you're a gangster to me. Someone who's just going ham on the violin. Oh, I love seeing that in person. I'll throw you a tip any day of the week.
sounds good. Come on out anytime.
It's just so dry hot out there. I'm like a lizard. I need to soak up the sun and get some of that.
What part of Florida, by the way? Are you close to Tampa by chance?
No, so Tampa's the other coast. So Tampa is where we have our coach, Anthony Plaza, and then one of our PTs that we work with indirectly, his wife is Maria Heierholzer. I guess Maria Plaza now. They got married. Yeah, that's how that works. Paul and I are in Melbourne Beach area, and then if you go to the middle of the state, you've got Orlando, which is where Jason is. The great city of Orlando, Sanford, Maitland, that kind of area.
It's Sanford, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm giving you Orlando because no one knows what Sanford is.
Isn't that where they shot The Office?
in Sanford.
No, they did not. They did.
No,
Scranton.
isn't that the fictional town?
Sanford's not known for a lot of
Scranton.
good things.
Oh, okay.
The Office is Scranton, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's where I'm from in Pennsylvania.
Hey, Dylan, are you part Asian?
I'm not. No. I've never got that. My brother's.
I need to know why you asked.
Oh, it was the violin thing.
Oh.
I don't know.
Dylan, are you half black?
Not today, Jason. Not today.
We'll let you in though, Dylan. Well, I know some people will get you the emails.
I feel like me and Dylan, we look like we could be the same species.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
I could see that.
All right.
You need to put another 20 pounds on to get to your
There it
height
is.
or get to your level,
There
Paul.
it is. We can get you there. We can find a way. The technology exists. Tell Cliff you're leaving him. You found some new coaches that think that you might be half black, half Asian,
Yes,
and
science on
can
our
easily
side.
get you to a lean 240.
Exactly.
Blasian.
All right. So before we kind of dive into our deeper discussion for today, which is around kind of disordered eating within the bodybuilding space, I think it's important whenever you have one of these conversations that's about a highly charged, very complex topic that you start with definitions. So we have to operate on the same page in terms of what we mean when we say certain words. And this is a space, I'm sure it frustrates the living hell out of you, where people throw around words and terms without fully understanding what they mean. And they might actually do more harm than good by misnomering or misdefining these kind of things. So when we look at disordered eating versus eating disorder, what is the definition of those two and how do they differ from each other?
I feel like disordered eating, it's the umbrella overarching term, essentially. And there's like a continuum spectrum of that. So on one spectrum, you have that normal body image. Maybe they're a little dissatisfied with things. They start just a fad diet. They start dieting a little bit, controlling their calorie intake, or they might swing to maybe some emotional eating, but nothing too to the extremes. Then in the middle of that continuum, you have that symptomologies or symptoms of eating disorders. So like we were talking about earlier, they might have 2 or 3 of these criteria to meet a certain diagnosable disorder within the eating disorders. And then if they meet all 5 or however many criteria of the DSM diagnoses, and that could be considered a diagnosable eating disorder, essentially.
So when you identify these criteria, can you give the people maybe an example of what the criteria might be, like what you're specifically looking for? Like person X reports that they are performing this behavior, that's a checkbox. That counts as 1.
So, gosh, I would don't have the DSM memorized. I'd look at that, but usually some type of diagnosis over a certain length of period of time. So if this has been going on for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, again, I'd have to refresh all the diagnosis criteria. But again, it's usually a time period. And how often is this behavior or these things happening within that time period? So more days than not. So is it most days, like is it 5 out of the 7 days of the week, things like that? Or how many times is this behavior happening, more or less? And then again, obviously you split the eating disorders in different things. So you can, there's different, like with bulimia, there's the purging type versus the non-purging type, things like that, calorie restriction, excessive exercise, and things like that. So you can get specifiers within those diagnoses as well.
When you look at those specifiers, so I think there's within the space, I think people really understand or they know about anorexia. They know about bulimia. Those are the 2 that people I think really know a lot about. Ones that maybe, have like weaseled their way into the culture as maybe normal behavior would be things like exercise addiction and binge eating disorder. I think those are 2 that people say, exercise addiction. It's perfectly fine as a bodybuilder to go to the gym and lift weights for 3 hours and then do an hour and a half of 2 hours of cardio after that to maintain this body. Or, it's perfectly normal. Coach gives me a cheat day that I go out and I consume 8,000 calories worth of Krispy Kreme donuts. I do that once a week. It's part of my plan. It can't be an eating disorder or a disordered eating if it's part of my plan. Do you see that in the industry?
Would you say maybe orthorexia falls into that too?
I would say to some degree, yes. And can you talk a little bit more about that, Paul? What do you mean?
Or I think that's the term. Just people who are obsessed with like, I believe it's like healthy eating or eating clean food. Clean.
Oh, so orthorexia, like nervosa, things like that. So the optimal nutrition type stuff. Okay, yeah. And so I don't think that's a diagnosis in the DSM. But again, there's people that like no, yeah. That really, I like would veganism or being a vegetarian kind of fall under that, or just someone that can only eat those clean calories, essentially, not have that flexible dieting.
Yeah.
I think it comes down.
No, I was just thinking because Ryan was mentioning things that have like kind of fell into somewhat of a norm that people don't look at as, well, I guess maybe like an issue.
Well, in the DSM, there's the it's called the elimination. I can't think of it right now, but it talks about you eliminate certain foods. Essentially, you only eat certain foods, or you're about that, like you can't go outside that norm, or it causes that distress or the anxiety, things like that. So they have to eat within a certain diet. So again, when you talk with bodybuilders, again, some coaches have, this is what you can eat. This is your diet for the week, for the day, chicken breast, broccoli, rice, things like that. But again, it goes back to, are you eating that, macros, flexible dieting? What's your diet? What kind of diet does your coach have you on? So I don't know, what kind of diets do you guys try to put your clients on?
Jay, you want to take that one?
Yeah. I think I try to be a little bit, I guess when I go through the consult period, I will try to sort of ask the person, or not even necessarily ask them, just try to determine their personality a little bit as to what may work for them. Like for some people may need some level of structure that might look like a meal plan or a meal plan with some options. And some people might have the fortitude or at least the knowledge to, go fully into tracking where they can just use MyFitnessPal and, they feel comfortable with that. And, that's going to be a little bit of a slippery slope because tracking itself, I think, and that was going to be one of my questions. I feel like that could lead into its own level of neurosis itself. But usually I just try to have a conversation with that person and try to determine just how much help they need. So it isn't necessary. There was a time where I would try to give everybody macros and everybody had to track. And that was the only way that I did it. And then as I've gotten, older or maybe just experienced different personalities over time, like now I try to shift things a little bit where some people might track, some people might have very simple rules, like, just make sure that you eat protein X amount of times a day, or stay away from these things, or, it might be something as even as simple as like drink this much water. It's shifted over time, I think, at least for me personally.
Okay.
I'm very different. I won't work with somebody if they won't track. Or like sometimes I'll do like a rough kind of meal plan thing, but it's just the type of client that I'm looking to work with, right? Like I want that accuracy and I want to be as sure as possible that we're doing things that move us in the right direction, right? So
yeah. So for me, working with my coach, he does macros as well. And I was like, can you just tell me what to eat? Just tell me the foods, the amounts, the grams, the ounces, whatever, just to make this one less thing I have to think about and track and develop a meal plan for myself. And I'm like, how do people do it? You see all these bodybuilders, going to, Chipotle or going to these restaurants. How are they tracking their meals too? And so he's like, really for the norm, a lot of athletes keep their meal plans, they eat the same thing daily, but they change the amounts they eat, or they might replace one meal for that day with something else, a different protein source, carb source, things like that. But really, once you get into the bodybuilding, when you're in that competitive mode or you're trying to do things, you try to keep things really precise and not really change the whole things up, again, for your sanity, because again, I can see people spending hours upon hours each day or, their whole Sunday trying to meal prep and develop that perfect meal plan for them, which is just added the stress of already a stressful sport.
I will say this. I like to tell people like, hey man, there are times where we have to be very stringent and there are times where we can reel back a little bit and hey, try not to stress out about, the birthday thing coming up this week. Like it's okay if you don't track that meal. Let's try not to go insane too. And, hey, it's the improvement season. You can be a little more loose, right? Let's just try not to let things get out of control. If we have to, we'll reel them in, if things do get a little out of control, like, hey, it's not the end of the world. You've lost it before, you can lose it again. And then obviously like getting closer to a diet or in a dieting period, I'm like, hey, if you don't want this to last forever, we need to be a little more stringent. We can't have as many liberties,
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I think there's a question in here and this is for everyone, is like, where is that tipping point from where a diet or a nutritional pursuit for optimizing body composition becomes, this is just par for the course of what needs to be done, to where it becomes disordered? Because like you guys are mentioning, like the meal plan can be disordered at its heart. We can get into some of the orthorexic behaviors of these are the foods that you are allowed to have, these are the foods that you're not allowed to have. Then you create this dichotomy of good and bad foods, which doesn't necessarily exist. But the same exists for the flexible dieting. The people who, like Dylan said, are spending hours in MyFitnessPal, like, oh no, 96 grams instead of 98. That way I can have, an extra chocolate chip over here. Like that, in my opinion, is also disordered. Dylan, I think you did a good job of defining, it might've been before we started, you said something about when it creates undue stress or undue anxiety on the individual, that's when it transitions over. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So really, I don't try to put my clients in the DSM box. I don't say, you have an anxiety disorder, you have an adjustment disorder, you have X, Y, and Z. People come into my office all the time with all these different concerns and problems that they're facing. And really, for example, someone that can be restricting their calories, exercising quite a bit, if they have a life full of enjoyment, I would argue that they might not to that if they're doing the, excessive working out, restricting calories, not enjoying the holidays, things like that. But if something doesn't really cause them to, and I learned this in grad school, like in one of my first classes, if it does not cause a person distress or impairment in their daily function or lives, then it's really hard to say, okay, they can meet most of the criteria, but if they're not really, I would argue, is it causing them impairment or a significant other, a loved one, their family members distress or impairment as well? So causing them or someone else distress or impairment is how I like to classify diagnoses or problem areas in a person's life.
So is that kind of clear across the board with most, I guess addiction, such a weird term, but is that kind of the way that you determine those things is, is it infringing on your life, or is it causing you distress, or is it, are you thinking about this thing all the time? Is that how you kind of come up with those diagnoses?
Let's talk about someone that likes to go binge drinking. And so binge drinking, I don't know the exact definition, but for like men, if you have more than like 5 or 6 drinks in one setting, I think it might even be a little bit less, like 4.
I think it's like more than 2 or 3 even potentially. I could be wrong. I'm not the expert here.
So most people 21 years or older have probably binge drink quite a bit in their lifetime, college, things like that. Yeah, exactly. And so with that being said, did that cause you distress or impairment, Paul? Did you wake up today maybe a little hungover, but is that so distressing where you're beating yourself up? You're saying, I'm just an idiot. I'm a fool. I'm a failure for you going binge drinking the night before, things like that. So a lot of people can go do those types of behaviors and be completely fine. They can have plenty of friends. They're successful with their work. They're happy with themselves. And that's just what they do. They go out and they drink and they have a good time, and they do it once in a while, not every day.
I like that because I know, being involved in the fitness community for over a decade now, especially when Instagram and social media got big, there was like a phase where people were like, there's something wrong with you if you can't enjoy Thanksgiving or whatever, and you got to bring your food. And then I think a few years ago, the pendulum swung in the other direction and people were like, no, it's cool. Do what makes you happy. Right.
But if that drinking turns into drinking, driving, getting in a DUI, but everything's fine, I'm good, but I have a DUI or 2, or I'm on my 3rd divorce, but I'm living my life, I would argue that could be a diagnosis or definitely a serious matter, just because you're like, I'm fine, everything's good. So you can bring that back around. I've talked to a few athletes, like they enjoy what they do. It's a passion. They love it. They live and die with bodybuilding, but then they isolate from their families. Their parents can't get a hold of them. They don't go to Christmas holidays, or if they do, there's an argument about, are you going to bring your own food or are you going to eat our food, things like that. They don't go celebrate birthdays and go out to restaurants. And if they do, they're having a meltdown, things like that.
I actually have a question, right? Is how you differentiate that stuff, because I would assume, because I've had shared some of these behaviors, right? And I think like a lot of times maybe it does impede parts of their life or relationships, but they'll tell you that it doesn't, and it just makes them happy. They're like, oh, what? Like, this makes me happy. I want to do it. But like, somewhere in there's something going on, right? There's some friction.
Mm-hmm. I think you have to really be honest with yourself about, why am I doing this sport? And it can be anything. It can be, why am I an amateur fill in the blank with the sport? Why am I doing this? Is this what I do for a living? Am I actually making money off this? Am I supporting myself and my family with this sport? And really, why did I get into this in the first place? Because a lot of people, I think, Paul, you were mentioning, did you wrestle in high school?
I didn't.
Or did you play sports in high school? You didn't? Well, a lot of we're talking, Ryan, about just wrestling is another example of just how some eating disorders might show up with that kind of restrictive diet, things like that. But really, why did a bodybuilder become a bodybuilder? Because, the chances of them being pro and, actually making a decent living off it is really, the percent is kind of is low. And so it's like, are you doing it for that? Or are you doing it for the Instagram followers, or what are you really doing it for? Yeah. That really makes it matter, or makes the difference between the isolation, I'm just going to do it because I have to mentality, or I love it, I'm going to enjoy the whole process of it.
I think those are
go ahead, Jason.
Okay. I think those are definitely good things, good points you brought up, because I've noticed, especially, and Paul brought that up as well, like recently, and maybe because of my age and sort of going through seeing bodybuilding in a number of different sort of iterations over time. When I was a kid, there were just magazines, and you just knew the people that you went to the gym with, or you might go to a show and see some other bodybuilders, where now it's so large that being the biggest guy at your gym isn't satisfying, because there's a bunch of people at other gyms that are now bigger than you. And that itself would almost seem like it leads into or lends to some of those, those behaviors that bodybuilders have, where it's like they're constantly not good enough. So I think, I guess that would be. So do you feel like that just because bodybuilding has changed overall, its perception or even its reception overall, do you feel like that's changed people's behaviors within bodybuilding itself? Have you noticed that at all?
I would definitely kind of like to get your guys' thoughts on that too, but I'm curious if Instagram and social media didn't exist, how many people would actually be in the sport today, and how many bikini competitors or how many physique competitors there would be if there wasn't Instagram or TikTok and all these different the ways they receive that external and instant gratification, that external validation piece, because it is an expensive sport. It's really a lot of dedication. And some people, as you probably see, they hop in this sport, they do it for a few years, and they hop on stage. They don't do very well, and they're it's not for some people it might not be about doing the best or getting the first place, but it's about bettering themselves. I can see that with many people. They do it to better themselves because it is a grind. It's a certain mindset. But again, I'm curious on how many people, much smaller the community might be if there wasn't social media around.
I have had the talk with plenty of clients and friends, clients that, because, I think maybe it was around the 2012s, 2010 or something. Like all of a sudden you see people like making money on YouTube, like Matt Ogus and them and stuff. And then you see people getting followers on Instagram. So there's that external validation point. But then you see some people lucky enough to monetize it, right? So now there's incentive for being a bodybuilder, looking good and potentially building a following and potentially making money off of it. And I've had to tell a lot of clients over the years, I'm like, hey man, making a YouTube to review ice cream, like, I'm sorry, that's not a super lucrative thing. Like if you want to coach, you can make money, and that's probably where you should put the eggs in the basket if you want to make money from this. But it's not going to be competing. Probably not YouTube, right? Like it's a very saturated market already, and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I think social media absolutely has had a massive impact on how many people are in this activity now, and also what drives them to be a part of it. We mentioned this just before the call when we talked. I think, a lot of people were like me, where they just weren't happy with the way they looked, right? And they started gravitating towards it through various pathways. And then with social media, I think that introduced a lot of new factors that people are now also attracted to.
I think it's funny
noticed,
that you picked on bikini girls. You were like, the bikini division. And I was like, man, you know what? He's 100% right. I remember my first show in like 2013, 2014. Maybe it was just because I was very hyper focused on like the bodybuilders that were backstage and like, oh, how am I going to do compared to these guys? But man, I don't remember like any bikini girls backstage. Like maybe like 6 or 7 bikini girls in the whole show. And then I did my last show in 2019 and it was like, you know, our best turnout ever. We've got 300 bikini girls here. Like, oh my God. So we went from 6 5 years later to 300. Like, wow, that's a really large growth there. So yeah, I think that division in and of itself is one that has exploded. And I think a lot of that has been driven by Instagram validation on social media. It's like it's a beauty pageant times 100. It's a fancy suit, it's makeup, it's hair, it's trophies, it's compared to other people. Like, I'm the best, first call out, center of first call out, I won my class. It's a lot of like, there's a lot of baked in validation there if you do well. But I also think that there's an infinite amount of opportunities to be extremely disappointed in yourself in a very, very subjective sport. Like, it really can chew people up and spit people out just because the subjective feedback from the judges, especially in a division like bikini.
Dude, I don't want to detract from that, but I just thought about too how like social media changed the image of what this sport can bring you to. And I think falsely a lot too, but, you know, anytime in my, like, I've never looked at a bodybuilder and thought like Lambo, you know, or lots of money or a mansion or anything like that. But then you got like, I don't know, companies like Blackstone Labs and PJ Braun posting with fancy cars and, you know, hiring these bodybuilders or bikini girls. And all of a sudden, all of these fitness, you know, icons, they just have all this nice shit and nice money. They probably just rented the Lambo for the day. Like, you know what I mean? But it definitely changed that image.
You know who didn't have to rent it was Ronnie Coleman. 2001, 2002 redemption documentary. He's in the tricked out Hummer and he's doing some of these. Listen, that was 100% authentic, but you ain't Ronnie and you can't.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, back in the day, I mean, like Sean Ray, like all those guys, they drove exotic cars. That's, you know, Flex Wheeler. Like they're like, I got a Lambo, or that's, you know, I got my Corvette. So definitely, I think things shifted quite a bit. And I think a little bit of that's not just
the top guys.
Well, a little bit of it is the people that are actually making money don't compete. I mean, like that's just honest. That's 100. I mean, you got to figure Chris Bumstead probably makes more money than everybody in the open division, because he's good at social media. He's probably the most popular. And I'm sure he probably makes more money because Classifics, he still doesn't get paid that much, even as a winner. No. So he's probably making more money from everything else that doesn't involve bodybuilding. But look at, what's that fella's name? Christian Guzman. That guy is papered up. Bradley Martin hasn't competed in a really long time. He's also fairly papered up. So it's all these people that either don't compete or compete at a level. I think Christian Guzman competes at like his own show, I think, or maybe he competes in, you know, smaller shows in Texas or something like that. But it's a lot of people on social media that are making money from fitness that don't compete at all. I found that go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I found that as time's gone on, I've met or encountered more competitors that usually the first thing that kind of comes out of their mouth is that they would like to be an influencer. Like they're competing to become an influencer, which seems weird because it's like you don't have to compete to be an influencer. You could just go straight to the money. You could just skip the whole competing part.
But isn't the money and the influence and the social status within the health and fitness space still wrapped entirely around your body image? Don't we see that the only reason why Chris Bumstead, Bradley Martins, the Christian Guzmans of the world, why they can sell their product is because it's attached to a shirtless photo. And I think a lot of that gets back to feeding into, if you're viewing that content continually and you're seeing that as the pinnacle of what success is, I think you're going to struggle with things that, like some other things that we need to define, like body dysmorphia, muscle dysmorphia. Dylan, I heard you say it before we started the call, bigorexia. Is that an actual legitimate term now? Is that a recognized term that's used? Okay.
Synonyms for muscle dysmorphia, essentially. Yeah. So it's you can interchangeable.
So what are our definitions there? What's the definition between body dysmorphia and muscle dysmorphia? What's the difference there?
Really, they're interchangeable, or body dysmorphia. So goodness. So just being unsatisfied with just seeing yourself in a flawed view. So not, again, looking at yourself and saying, you know, I could be skinnier, or I don't like this, like this could be better. And it doesn't have to just be, it can be with your facial things too. So, you know, Botox has become more accessible and actually, I think cheaper nowadays than ever. And so people are doing all these different types of things with Botox, all these different types of treatments that I've never heard of. I know cryotherapy type stuff for facial wrinkles, stuff like that. So again, it's just, and I think, you know, social media, the media, TV, movies, all these different types of things. And with, you know, with seeing this all the time, you know, we all have phones next to us right now. So we can hop on Instagram, social media, and just start scrolling and seeing all this different type of stuff. And it's like when we start comparing ourselves, we feel less than others. We try to, you know, get the equal playing field, or we try to go one up that better than. And so we try to overcompensate by whatever means. We try to make more money. We try to look skinnier, get more muscles, things like that. You know, have X, Y, and Z to feel better about ourselves because we don't. There could be some jealousy there. There could be some like, you know, that I need to do that to feel some type of joy and excitement in my life. And so again, not to blame social media, but with things becoming so accessible, I'm sure you could hop online, type in Botox facility, and there could be one not too far away. And it's a little bit cheaper since, you know, more people are doing it, more people are becoming certified. It's a lot cheaper nowadays, supply and demand. And so again, with all that stuff, you know, so many people at such a young age too are getting, you know, enhanced breast, or you know, we can even talk about PEDs and things like that too. That can be some type of, you know, it is an enhancement, but again, for men and women, to go to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all this that's going on right here. This is, I'm not afraid to admit it. This isn't natural. This isn't me. These are fillers right here. This line right here. These lips, fillers, all of it. I'll admit it.
Did you pay for that?
I did. I paid good money for it.
I know more people that get these, but more guys that get Botox than I ever thought I would. I'm like, holy shit, dude. I have friends that get Botox. Like,
well, it's so readily available now, and it's so like widespread throughout the community that I don't think it's really it doesn't have the stigma or the taboo around it that it used to, like a man getting Botox. Like 2010, you're like, oh, like, you know, me and my boys, we're gonna get Botox. You're like, what? You're gonna do what? Now it's so widespread and readily available, like you said, Dylan.
For men that are they're losing their hair at a young age,
how
you know,
dare
balding.
you?
They're able to get, you know.
Not Jason's
I know,
people.
Jason. I know. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I've got my eyebrows waxed before, if that makes a difference. But again, we don't like something about ourselves, we try to change it because we're able to, with a certain amount of money, with, you know, things that are availability. It's really easy to change whatever we want about ourselves. To some degree. So again, I don't think, you know, the bodybuilding community, athletes, it kind of, again, we take it to that extreme level too. We really, the normal populations here in the bodybuilding community definitely takes it up a few notches when it comes to changing their body shapes, their different through many means as
and
well.
Before we started the call, before Jason hopped on with us, Dylan and Paul and I were discussing, what it's like a chicken and an egg kind of thing of like disordered eating. Is it something that bodybuilding causes in people? Are there disordered eating patterns a result of taking part in bodybuilding? Or was this an individual who maybe already had some disordered eating patterns and they saw bodybuilding as an outlet for those, or as a way to normalize those behaviors? Is it in a sport that attracts these individuals? Is it a sport that creates these issues, or is it maybe a mixture of the two? Jason, I haven't gotten your opinion on it yet. Let's hear it.
That's an interesting question. I think for me personally, I think there were certain, personality traits that probably would have lended to me eating. I'm just an over analytic person in general. Like I can't just make a decision. So analyzing how I was going to eat as soon as I started bodybuilding and start to realize that, eating like this, which involved numbers and involved timing and involved like a lot of things that I could kind of like overanalyze. That's when it lended to my personality a ton. It still lends to and I feel like, I think, over the past 25 years or so, eating like a bodybuilder has been the one character trait or personality, I guess you can call it a dysfunction, that I've almost tried to get rid of, and it just will not go. Like I can't remove the anxiety that I get if I know that I haven't had 4 to 5 servings of protein that day. I'm like what do I do? Like I can't just go to bed. Do I get in the car? Do I drive and go find some chicken somewhere? Like there's no chicken here. Like do I have some weight? Like it's a weird thing. So I think it's probably a combination of the two, and I think there are probably some people that may have had some level of disordered eating beforehand and bodybuilding lended to it, but I'd like to think that bodybuilders are a personality trait, and bodybuilding just kind of unlocks a lot of that through that whole entire process.
Yeah.
When I feel like it's like a control thing, right? It's almost like you feel like you have control on those inputs and outputs. Like I control the time of day that I eat. I control the portions. And Dylan, I wonder how much in your practice you talk with people who are coming from that bodybuilding background, and it does feel like something that they are in control of. Maybe things outside of bodybuilding they feel like are really, for lack of a better term, out of their control, and bodybuilding is that one thing that they can. Is that like a common conversation that you have?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to look at things and as like a biopsychosocial, so biology to genetics. Did their mom or dad have an eating disorder, or did they have a poor relationship with food? And some females are more likely than males, based on statistics, to have some type of eating disorder. Some ethnicities are more likely to have an eating disorder than other ethnicities as well. So you look at the genetics and hereditability factors and things like that as well. But then you also look at the environmental and social factors, like peer influences. What kind of for me, example, I was a fat, overweight, obese kid that could barely do a push-up or pull-up and got picked on for my weight. And so I hated it, and I didn't even mean to join wrestling. It was just right there in front of me, and I did it, and I lost weight. And when I left for college, came back over the summers, people I went to high school with, I graduated. My class was like 210 folks, my graduating class in high school. And some people I went to high school with, and I went to high school with all 4 years, they didn't even recognize me because I lost that much weight. They're like, holy crap, you've changed so much. And so again, getting those external validation, that was like, wow, look at like what I did. People came and recognized me. I'm not going to get picked on anymore. And then I'm like that kind of big guy. Again, I'm not big to many people, but in certain groups of people, I was that big guy. And again, I'd rather be that big guy than that fat, obese kid as well. So again, you look at the environmental, social factors as well. Did your parents play sports? Was your dad a football star and wanted to ingrain that perfectionistic attitude in you, like, that all or nothing mindset, like you're going to be number one. And so you take that throughout your work career, your college career, any sports you do and things like that, to be number one and have that mindset. And then you look at the psychological factors, like I just talked about. So just looking at yourself in a negative light and having that low self-worth, that low self-esteem, maybe some impulsivity there, or like Jason, you talked about that control factor, like you like to have control of certain things. And this is one area of my life where I can control. I can control what I consume. I can be really precise. And this control and precision can get me this trophy, this pro card. And then again, looking at, like I said, family values too, the high expectations. Maybe mom told their daughter, hey, you kind of look a little chubby today in that dress. You might want to change, just little subtle things. The mom meant well, but mom didn't want their daughter to be picked on, possibly, like, because, kids aren't the nicest. And so just little things like that. Maybe parents went around and so they got comfort in food, things like that. So you can look at all these different types of positive, negative reinforcement factors that create some type of mental health concerns, anxiety, depression, some OCD tendencies possibly, and then these eating disorders that we've been talking about, or disordered
eating. Would you say that kind of what you just listed off there is pretty much your standard procedure when you have someone who comes to you for the first time? Like, do you start with that biopsychosocial model and then you kind of go from there, or is there a different, because and you're a coach too, so you understand, like when we get a new athlete that comes in, like we start with a needs analysis. Is that something similar to what you would do with with a patient who comes to you? Like, is there a needs analysis process where you kind of list off certain things that may be at the root of the issue? What's the procedure there?
Mm-hmm. I usually have them do like an intake form that has a bunch of different questions about just family history a little bit. What's your relationships like now? Kind of like, and I kind of break it down to like an assignment too. So it's called like this wellness wheel assignment that breaks down all aspects of wellness and a holistic thing, because everything's really interconnected. If you look at it, your mental health is connected to your physical health, and your physical health is connected with maybe your relationships and social health, and then your emotional health as well. If you it's connected to your finances and career and spirituality. If you hate your job, you're probably going to be stressed out, which might lead to, I'm stressed, depressed, angry. I'm not going to go to the gym today. I'm going to eat like crap today. And again, that affects your physical health. And then you might not want to be around people. So just things that, like, they're all interconnected. So it's not just you focusing on that one piece of the pie with mental health, and coaches that just focus on that one piece of the pie with physical health too, but it's trying to, how are they all interconnected? So I kind of roll out things too. So with some of these things, because some of these can be medical as well. So always roll out medical stuff too with any mental health things as well. Is it medical or is it mental? So is it medical or is it physical? So just always having them go get blood work, having them go see maybe a psychiatrist, talk to their primary care physician to see if there's anything medical that's causing a problem before we look at any mental health interventions.
So I have a question. Is addictive personality, is that like a thing? Like, can people have addictive personalities?
To just in general,
well, I mean,
yeah,
things. Or I mean, it could be probably many things over a lifetime, but I mean, it could just be like one thing at a time, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's called like displacement, replacement type stuff. So, for example, father could be an alcoholic, mother an alcoholic, so I'm going to stay away from alcohol. But again, that type of stuff is hereditary too. It can run in the family. It can be generational trauma, generational addiction, things like that. So they might say, I'm not going to ever drink, but then they're always in the gym, or they're in the casino, or they're always on the video games, things like that. So addiction can be, you can replace one thing for another. So I'm never going to drink again. So people become sober and they find the gym. So again, I would say, is it just because they have a good addiction? Or we can look at workaholism, right? Workaholism is an addiction, but it's probably one of the most widely acceptable addictions, and people are praised for having that grind mentality, that workaholism. And so they could say, I'm going to work 80 hours a week and not have a social life and barely have a good diet, like they're eating like crap and they're rarely sleeping, so their physical health is declining. And they're just, if they're not working, they're not happy, they're not making money, they're not happy. So again, they're probably really depressed or low self-worth. And again, so looking at societal factors too, and cultural factors as well, depending on the culture they were raised in as well.
I was just thinking about that because I've noticed that about myself, then like that I always find like a thing and I will run it into the ground. That's like all I do and think about. And that's like what like eventually things pushed me towards like bodybuilding in terms of body image and all that stuff. And then, you know, I just got super into it, and that's been my life for the past decade pretty much, you know. And then now I'm getting into new things and I'm like, oh man, I need to be careful because I'm starting to realize that in my free time all I do is read about this one thing. I want to learn more about it. I'm like, am I about to blow the whole next decade of my life on what I'm getting into right now? Like
at least it can lead to burnout eventually. You know, that all or nothing mentality. It gets exhausting to always, you know, run at 100 miles per hour. You know, it's like, you know, life is a marathon, not a sprint. And so is like
that's why I try
bodybuilding.
to talk to a lot of my younger clients about sometimes when it seems like they're edging towards burnout, or they just say certain things that like put me back in like my 22-year-old body, you know, and I'm like, hey man, like passion is good, but you can't just let passion go uncontrolled and just run it into the ground because you like doing it. Like if you want to enjoy something and really be successful at it long term, you have to control the passion, you know? You got to learn to pump the brakes a little bit and not, you know, just
slow strokes.
Miles an hour.
You don't go in there jackhammer from the start. You got to slow stroke it. Enjoy it while it's going on.
Yeah.
Dylan, I had a question, and maybe this is just my own. This is probably a selfish question, but in your experience, how do you get someone to go from a life of being a competitive, or maybe even a naughty, maybe just like they're competitive in their gym as far as bodybuilding goes? Is that something that is that sort of transfer of lifestyle to just being like a normal person that eats like a normal person and doesn't stress out about those things? Is that do you find that transition being difficult for a lot of people, or, you know, how would you handle that, or what's the mindset do you think around that transition?
So you said you've been doing bodybuilding for 2 decades now, essentially, or 25 years, yeah. So quite a long time. So it's your
as
identity, more or less. It's who you are. Is that kind of...
It is, especially as I've gotten older. You know, I've got a family, I've got a child. So there's certain personalities just don't lend to being a bodybuilder. It just doesn't work out that way. Like the things that used to stress me out, like we're going on a family vacation. I'm like, oh shit, like how am I going to bring all my food? Where's the closest gym, like to the hotel? Like, you know, those things that
it's funny. It's funny you say that, because I was having a conversation with a group of friends about how probably in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm going to probably distance myself, my personal life a bit away from bodybuilding, because I'm like, I feel like this is more of an obstacle of new things I want in my life than it's like pushing my life forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's what I was just interested. I mean, I'm interested in that. I mean, it's selfishly, again, that transition, I think.
Well, it's not. I'm going to take it away from the selfishness piece and apply it broadly, because, you know, I work in 2 private practices. And so the practices I work at, I work a lot with law enforcement. And so with that being said, a cop that's been a cop for 20 plus years is no longer a cop for whatever reason. They retire, they medically retire, they're not fit for duty. And so they can't be a cop anymore. So their identity, their life was around them being a cop. That's who people know them as, that cop. And so people know you, Jason, as that pro bodybuilder. So your family, your friends, your clients, Jason, the pro bodybuilder. And so with that being said, how do you separate your identity from your work, your career, what you do, your hobbies, And so it's not like what you do isn't who you are. How you feel isn't who you are. Who you are is who you are. So really trying to look internally to figure out who am I without all these things. So I ask clients, so who are you without being a cop, or who are you without being, I'm a dad, I'm a husband. Well, if you weren't a husband or a dad for whatever reason, if those were taken from you, if that were ever, then who are you? Who are you without making X, Y, and Z, without being CEO, things like that? So really, when you take titles and roles away, who are you? And that's really a spirituality question, I think, to really dive deep and look internally, because we try to define ourselves by all the things that we do and how we feel. If we feel like we're a failure, then we are a failure. If we feel like we're amazing, then we are amazing. But really trying to take our feelings out of that as well, to not let our feelings and emotions define us either.
Because even sort of, and Brian, I'm sure you went through the same thing, transitioning from bodybuilding to CrossFit. It's like there's certain things that we hold on to as bodybuilders, and it could be something as simple as like a training modality, or even like an exercise. Like, I don't need to do curls anymore, and you're like, what? Like, what do you mean I don't need to do curls anymore for CrossFit? Like, how dare you? Like, it's just certain things that we've latched onto that, at least I feel like I know, like internally, I know that I no longer need to do these things, even if it is in just relation to exercise or fitness. Like, I know that I no longer need to do these things, but for whatever reason, even when I look at my own programming, I'll write a program that looks exactly like every bodybuilding program I've ever written in my entire career, knowing that I have other goals that have nothing to do with bodybuilding whatsoever. It's like one of those things. It's like really hard to let go of. Ryan probably knows more about that than I do, because he seemed to do a pretty good job.
I'm worse than ever before. I'm deeper down the rabbit hole. I've just got a different endeavor. It's like the rabbit hole kept getting deeper, but I just like branched off and went that direction instead. So it's like, and people will tell me like, oh no, you got separated from bodybuilding. Like, how smooth was it? Well, after tracking my macros for 7 years straight without missing a single day, I don't do that anymore. So I guess that's good. And it's like, oh, you just like you do your CrossFit and like you go home. It's like, yeah, I just go to the gym and I just do my 3 hours of training. And then I spend the rest of my day reloading my True Coach, waiting for Tom to write my next day of programming so I can start obsessing over exactly how I'm going to pace out that next training piece. So I think that I have successfully transitioned away from bodybuilding, but I think now that Dylan has brought it up, I kind of have that replacement thing where it's like, I just replaced it with something else to obsess over. So, did I do a good job?
You got to, man. You got to, dude. You'll go crazy.
I would.
Like, I'm thinking about pushing away from bodybuilding over the next 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, man, I need to start mentally preparing myself now for like not being a big guy. Like, you know what I mean? And the only way to do that is I got to replace it with a new hobby, right? Like, I got to try to be good at something else.
And for me, even it's like it's a competition thing.
Jacked. Yes, the competition thing definitely has helped out. I think that
I can't deal with the fact of not winning
is better for my input-output brain, my input-output bodybuilding brain, than bodybuilding actually was, because we've removed the subjectivity. There's weights, there's pounds, there's times. You either went faster than me or you didn't. And I don't know if that's been good for my brain or if it's just been like giving me something to overly obsess about, even more so than the subjectivity of bodybuilding. I don't know. That's why we got Dylan here.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to charge you guys for all these sessions too, by the way. No, but really, are you enjoying the process? So when you said I need to find something else to be really good at, Paul, do you want to be good, or you just want to have fun and enjoy? And so I ask clients that too. Are you doing this to be the best, or are you doing this because you enjoy the process? So I ask people, do you get into the sport because you love it, you enjoy it, and that's okay. But if you're doing it to get that trophy, to get that pro card, that's a problem, because if that never happened, then it was all this for nothing. And are you going to hate yourself because you feel like a failure because you didn't get that goal? If you love the process, if you love going to the gym and just trying to push yourself each day, trying to get that one extra pound, that one extra rep, you know, increasing that intensity, then I think that's a pretty good accomplishment right there. You know, just to disclose and share a little bit of my story, you know, with COVID wasn't good to me, you know, being activated for the military with the gym shutting down, with trying to see clients too, trying to juggle a lot of things. I gained probably about 40 pounds of not so good weight over the last 2 years. And so I'm down 21 pounds this year, which is nice. And I went from, again, many years ago to chicken, rice, broccoli and having that strict diet. I would freak out. I would try to plan my day around the gym and around my meals rather than planning my meals and gym around my day. And so, super stressful. And it was more stress to not go to the gym than actually go to the gym. And if I didn't have a good workout, then that was stressful and things like that. And so I'm so thankful. I think that it was like, you know, that burden was a blessing. I gained a lot of, I took probably a whole last year away from the gym. I was probably in the gym maybe 6 times a whole last year, which is completely working out 5-6 days a week to barely at all, like once a month maybe. And then not having that diet, I'm like, holy crap. Again, gained not so healthy weight, but I had that separation, and now I'm back in the gym. I'm on a nice meal plan with my coach, down some weight, and I actually look forward to going to the gym. And it's not I look forward to it because I have to. If I don't go to the gym, it's okay. If I don't feel like doing this body part, I do something else. So I'm trying to be more mindful of my time, my relationships, myself, and not making it like if I don't, then there's something wrong here.
There was a really good distinction that you made in there. It was like, are you pursuing this to be the best? Or are you pursuing this because you enjoy it? I think that's a really good parallel to draw right there. And it makes me worried for, not to detract too much here, but it makes me worried for Ash Ketchum of Pokemon, because he says that he wants to be the very best that no one ever was. And now I'm concerned that maybe Ash never wanted to catch all the Pokemon to begin with. Maybe he felt pressured by Dr. Oak to be the best that no one ever was, and he wanted to, I don't know, do something else with his life. Maybe run off with one of the other trainers and live a happy life. So that's my random aside. I'm worried about him. Has anyone ever heard from him?
These Gen Z folks know what we're talking about, though, unfortunately.
Right over. So one final question that I had for you, and it might be a quick one, it might be a long one. So you work with a lot of bodybuilders, and I think that I might be putting words in your mouth here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the period where you see bodybuilders undergo the most mental strain is probably in that post-show period, right? Immediately post-show, we're dealing with returning to normal, quote-unquote, normal eating patterns. There's that post-show blues. What are some commonalities that you might see in those individuals who are post-show, struggles that they may have, and ways that you've kind of worked around that successfully or attempted to work around that?
Yeah, I'll share a quick story to relate with that, because I had a buddy back in college, 6-7 years ago now, an undergrad. He was been lifting for 5-6 years, a little bit older than me as well. Skinny kid growing up, super jacked, off season 240. His stage weight, I think his first competition was like 185, first competition. And again, performance enhancing things like that as well, not to detract from his work ethic and his just consistency throughout all those years either. So he hopped on stage, looked amazing, but he's like, I look like crap, you know. I think he got third his first show. But again, he went so hard, so stressed for so long that after that competition, quit lifting, and he post-cycled completely fine, but he barely works out now. He got into drugs for a little bit, started to drink a lot, and he was so overwhelmed by the whole process. He just finally that relief. And so, yes, to answer your question, I do see that a lot, because again, they've had this goal for so long. They hit their goal. Now what? Now what do I do? Where's my next goal? Where's my next target to aim at? And they're kind of lost. You know, they don't have that. You know, they might be so exhausted. You know, I think, Jason, you said you do like a year prep. And so which is awesome, right? You don't hit that prep in 16, 20 weeks. You can expand that out so you're not having to cut weight so quickly. You can start kind of slow and just build up and gradually to the end rather than just hitting all really hard, really fast. And so with folks that, really, I like the whole year-long process or even that 8 to 10 month process rather than I'm going to do it in 4 months or 3 months and just like destroy their bodies, destroy their metabolism, destroy their mindset as well throughout the whole process. And then they're exhausted and they're just like, I'm done. This sport's not for me or whatever the case may be.
I think I had the opposite effect from dieting, prolonged dieting, to where like the prolonged dieting, I was like, dude, I'm beat on this. You know what I mean? And then you spend, when you diet that slow, and then maybe like slow reverse dieting is popular at the time potentially or whatever, you come out of that spending so long looking good that anything that's not that is just like, this looks awful. When do I get back to that? Like, when do I start dieting again and all that?
I think for me, like a big eye opener was, I set this goal where I said I wanted to be a pro. And then I got my pro card and I went to work on Monday. And this is when I was running a restaurant, and everybody was like, how'd you do? And I said, I won. They're like, cool. Can you get me a beer? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll go get that beer. Like nobody cared on Monday. And then I set the goal of like, I'm going to win my pro debut. And I went, I did my pro debut. I won. I got my little check for $200. Went to work on Monday. Everybody's like, how'd you do? And I'm like, I won. They're like, cool. Hey man, can you give me that side of fries right there? I'm like, oh yeah. So it immediately sort of shifted. It's like I'd reached the goal and now I'm like, so what do I do now? There's not. And so I kept. And then, in natural bodybuilding, there's 37 different pro cards you can get. So then I was like, I'm going to get all 37 of these pro cards. And then I'd start accruing those. And it was just that same sort of feeling of like I'd get to the goal. And then it wasn't that same. Once I got there, it's sort of the amount of joy that I had every time I got just started to decrease over time. And then I replaced that with, I'm going to compete because this is going to be good for business. I'm going to document this whole thing on social media. I'm going to make a ton of money off this. And about halfway through, just having my phone on me all the time and recording myself and not feeling great and hungry, just that was gone. I'm like, what am I doing here? And just that continuing to sort of set these little goals, I just kind of ran out of things to find interest in it.
No. I don't know if this is fucked up, but this is a little source of joy. Here we go. Me. And I only do it because I think these particular clients will be better for it. But I love bursting that bubble, like when they're taking things too seriously and I see that they're overly stressed about this. And I'm just like, hey man, I just want you to know nobody gives a shit. Right? Like I give a shit because you're paying me and I want you to be happy, and you win, I win. I'm like, a couple of your close friends give a shit if you compete and do well. No one else on this planet gives a fuck, dude. Like, and I think people need to have that realization early on, because if they don't, they might be having it in like their 30s and be like, holy fuck, what did I just do with the last 10 to 13 years of my life?
I think Dom's brought this up a number of times. Like bodybuilding is a terrible financial decision. Like it's not, it just is. Like you're not, if you're going to be top 10 in the world, you would probably know that after about a month, maybe 6 months, you would know. And it would be clear to everybody in the gym, like, well, this kid's probably going to be like, I'm sure that, I mean, I don't want to harp on Chris Bumstead. We're like Phil Heath in a basketball jersey looked like he probably would touch a weight and immediately grow. Like he just looked different than everybody else, just kind of standing there. So if you're not that person, there's a real good chance that is not your eventual outcome, is to be Mr. Olympia. So I think if people would shift their framing and kind of look at it like a hobby, it's a hobby. Do you like a hobby is like, I like to race RC cars. Okay. Is your entire personality sort of revolved around your
Also,
enjoyment
yes.
of racing?
Also, yes.
RC car.
They call me RC Ryan for a reason.
But I think as soon as people can kind of shift the way they look at it and see it as, and I it's tough for me. Some people that want to be influencers, I'm like, you should do that. like you should definitely think of bodybuilding or fitness as a way to become an influencer, because at the end of the day, there's probably a better chance of you creating some or having some sort of financial reward than what's going to happen when you get on stage. So I'm all for that. When people are like, I would like to be an influencer, I'm like, cool. It's kind of a weird goal, but do that. Like, do that.
Yeah.
It's almost a matter of resetting your frame of thought before you start. It's like, what advice can I give this person before they even go down this avenue, this life avenue, so that they can get the most out of the process? Someone the other day, it was like a quote on a video or something that I was watching, and it said, the man that loves running will always go further than the man who loves the finish line. So it's like, the more you can enjoy the running part, the farther you're going to go, regardless of where that finish line is. Because so many people are so hyper focused on that finish line, they do what Dylan said. They cross it and they say, now what? They've had everything that was their life for the past 6 months wiped out. They wake up, there's no more fasted cardio. There's no meal one. There's no full day of eating on your Instagram story. There's no posing practice. There's no pulling off the pump cover at the gym to show like how amazing you look. It's like, everything that was joy in that person's life for those 6 months has been ruined, and it hasn't been replaced with anything else along the way. So I wonder, Dylan, if you have any advice that you give people on the front end of a contest prep or a dieting phase, whatever it may be, that allows them to enjoy more of the process and have a smoother transition at the end.
Yeah. So when you talk about all these habits, because they become habits, they become ingrained, they become our daily routine, and so all this is creating these neural pathways in our brain. And so if we do these for so long, we create these neural pathways, we don't think about it, things become unconscious. You wake up, you go weigh yourself, right? And then you go grab your food scale, you're weighing things out, you're pulling things. So it's really become so ingrained in our nervous system and what we do. And so really, even weighing ourselves and looking at the number, that's ingrained. And so our progress is defined by how much we weigh, maybe, what we look like in the mirror, things like that, or how much weight we're putting, for powerlifters too, how much weight are we putting on the bar, or for CrossFit, how quick are we doing this event, things like that. And so really, when you take a step back and say, you know what, I might not do this for a while, until this is becoming an obsessive behavior or something I have to do, rather than it's like, I have to do this, I want to do this. I enjoy doing this, because I imagine there's a lot of people out there that don't enjoy weighing their food. They don't enjoy counting macros. They don't enjoy doing this. They want to make their coach happy. They want to please other people and prove to other people on Instagram that I can do this. I matter. I'm able to do this for some reason. And so, if you feel like you have to rather than a want, then I would kind of reevaluate things and where you're at with the sport or anything you do. It's like, I have to do this. Do you really have to? Or is it just something that you can't get away from for whatever reason?
It's so funny you bring up weighing your food, because I've caught myself putting things on the scale and I'm like, why am I putting this on the scale? Like, why? I don't need to weigh this. Like, why don't you just eat it? Like, I feel like those, and maybe that's where I come from. I think of tracking as being a bit of a weird neuroses in itself, is that it can't be healthy to kind of have anxiety that you can't put your food on the scale, or you can't find the thing in MyFitnessPal that looks like whatever you're eating. You should just be able to just eat. Like, that should be the end game, is that I can just eat food and not have to think about it quite as much, and realize, like, if I eat like this continuously over time, this is the way I'm going to look. And I can make adjustments based off of previous experience or previous data that I've collected from tracking. But I feel like that's far off for a lot of us. It's
crazy. It's like, how do you get people there? I had a phase where I had that anxiety, right? Like, if I went to visit my mom and she made something for dinner and I couldn't track it, I'd be like, internally, I'd be like, oh my God, like, no. Right. And I think I hit up my coach one day or something. I was like, dude, I am sick of tracking. Like, this is ruining my life. Like, it is like, oh, like, I'm like going over the edge and I'm about to blow up on this guy for like paying him to track my food, right? Like, but I don't know. I think he just said so. He was like, "Oh, well, I mean, dude, like if you want to not track a meal occasionally, it's totally cool." And like something just changed for me along the way, and like I just became okay with not tracking occasionally. And then all of a sudden, once that happened, I became okay with that and realized that it didn't really have to like it before. It felt like this invisible cage, and it's like, no, I can step out of this whenever I want. Now I track probably like 300 days out of the year, but it doesn't feel like I'm not like losing my mind over it and like, oh my God, like what the fuck? Like I can't ever enjoy these things. I'll never have a wing again because there's no macro split in this world that allows you to eat wings. Like, you know what I mean?
It's true. I mean, I've got a bunch of sort of latent behaviors from even like clean eating. There was a time where I would do the deal where I'd eat clean 5 or 6 days a week, and then I'd have like cheat day or cheat meal. And then I still kind of do that because I eat the same meals Monday through Friday. A lot of that's just based off simplicity. Like I don't have a lot of time to think about what I'm going to eat next, so I just eat the same foods. And then the weekends, like we talked about before the call, I have to like consciously tell myself, like, you do not need to overeat. Like, you don't need to eat past the point of fullness. You don't have to worry about how big you're going to get. You don't, like, those days are over. Like, leave that behind you. Just eat to your full like a normal human being. You can leave food on your plate. I mean, my wife and I have this discussion all the time about, like, you know, the clean plate club. Like, we're like, oh, we tell our son, like, you know, you have to clean your plate. And sometimes, like, no, he doesn't have to clean his plate. Like, that's like, if he says he's done eating, he's just done eating. Like, let's just let him make those decisions. Because I feel like all those behaviors kind of follow you through life, and then you kind of compound that with bodybuilding. And then it's really hard to kind of let that stuff go.
I just wonder how you get people there, dude, you know, because me personally, I've been through a lot of it. Like I've had points in my life where stepping on the scale in the morning, that could define how happy or upset I am for the rest of the day, right? It doesn't anymore. At some point, I just had a realization. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a big deal. No matter what my goal is, if I'm trying to gain weight or lose weight, I'm just like, oh, that's the number. And I separate from it as soon as I step off the scale. But I'm like, man, how did I get there? How do other people get there? You know what I mean?
I had this conversation with a client a couple of days ago where she stepped on this. She was telling me that her weigh-ins were affecting how she looked in the mirror. And these were like 48, 72 hours separated from each other. And I said, well, what did you do first? Did you look in the mirror first and then step on the scale? Or did you step on the scale and then look in the mirror? And she said, well, I weigh in and then I take my photos, or then I look in the mirror. And I said, can you entertain the possibility that maybe what you're seeing on the scale is skewing what you're seeing in the mirror? You're seeing a higher number on the scale, and that's affecting what you think you see looking back at you in the mirror. And she said, well, you know, that might be the way how it's going. And I see that a lot, where people let that number, like you said, ruin the rest of their day.
Yeah.
Definitely. In treatment facilities, they don't let the client, they get weighed every morning, but they turn them away from the scale and they hide the number from them. So the client doesn't know how much they weigh, because that number on the scale affects how they see themselves, like you said, in the mirror. And so again, looking away, not looking at the numbers. So not weighing yourself every day. Maybe once, when your coach wants you to check in on Monday, you weigh in Monday morning, and then you give your coach the number, things like that. So if it becomes a obsessive compulsive behavior, then maybe not doing that, you know, it's going to be hard. Again, it's having that balance for you, because it's easy for me to say that, but I'm not in my prep phase, and I'm not 4 weeks out from competing either, or 4 months out from competing. So I really don't need to make a certain weight. So I don't have to look at the scale every day. Even though I'm trying to lose weight, I can look at it once a week and know if I'm, you know, somewhat making progress.
Well, Dylan,
it's finding that balance.
I think we've taken too much of your time. We can only afford to pay you so much here. We're really struggling keeping a roof over our head here at Gifted Performance, and you know, an hour and 15 of your time is more than enough. Guys, did you have any final questions for Dylan? Dylan, any final points that you wanted to leave the people with here? Paul?
So there's this one time when I was, no, I'm kidding. I was about to try and get a full session, dude.
Dylan, please tell the people where
really,
they can find you, where they can reach out to you, where they can hire you, where they can purchase your services, all of that.
The business Stronger You Life Coaching and Wellness. My website's being worked on, so it's not up and running right now. But obviously, strongeryou.lifecoaching@gmail.com as well. And then Ryan, you can always, send people my way or give them my number and email, and they can always reach out to me via text message, phone call, things like that. But again, I really like that analogy. Enjoy the running, not the finish line, and you can take that with bodybuilding or any, do you really enjoy your job, or do you just look forward to getting that big paycheck at the end of the 2 weeks? So really just looking at your life. Yeah. So just enjoying the process.
All of Dylan's links, his social media profile, his email account, we won't include your phone number in the link just because so you don't get any kind of like weird communications going on there. If you are a client at Gifted Performance and you would like Dylan's number to reach out to him, please just message us at Gifted Performance or message one of the coaches here and we can relay that information to you. But email, we will throw the website link below for when it is up and running if people are watching this 6 months, a year from now, so they can find that website link, as well as his Instagram is in the description of this video if you want to reach out to Dylan. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming through. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff that bumps us up in the algorithm to get Dylan's handsome face in front of as many people as possible. It's been a great episode. Dylan, thanks for coming on. We'll see all of you guys on the next one. In the meantime and in between times, and as always, stay gifted. Paul?
Bye. Oh, buy the ER course.
Okay, yeah. You're really pimping that thing hard.